Tonight's news is brought to you by the neuropugilist's favorite soap, the old incessant 2222, as opposed to the old 12. So when you truly want to come clean, remember the brainy boxer's best friend, and don't forget our slogan. While everyone else spends 80 years on the setup, the more conscious are already to the punchline. And now to the news. One man got stuck on this planet, and he multiplied and became man. When it comes to merchandise, everyone knows that there are more foolish buyers than there are foolish sellers, yet few care to carry this into the area of ideas. Man is the face of time, just like Mickey Mouse on the dial of a Disney watch, the motions of his hands going round and round, up and down, measuring the movements of progress. On the wall in the philosophy department's restroom was written, "The desire to take medicine is the greatest distinction between man and animals." And as he shook it, the visiting textbook rep said to himself, "Nope, the desire to be sick." A man who for many years had been interested in certain matters finally traveled to a faraway land to consult with one purported to be expert in such affairs, and after gaining an audience, immediately presented the question that had brought him there. As regards the traditional descriptions of the experience and state of enlightenment, the awakening, the perception, the perfection of understanding, the union with the divine, the revelation of the secret, the immersion in eternity, the unveiling of the mystery, the integration with the infinite, the oneness, the illumination, the true knowledge of things. I have heard all of this recently described as simply being more conscious. Is this conceivably correct? Yep. The loss of a friend is the loss of a lung. A boy asked his father, "What is the difference in understanding how things are and accepting how things are?" Life said to a warrior, "Come on, admit it, you're mad." And the warrior said, "No." And life said, "Okay, admit that you're sad." And the warrior said, "No." And life said, "Well, admit to something." And the warrior said, "I'll admit to being alive." Remember, a real man is not merely his mind. Remember, a man is not merely his mind any more than he is just his body. Remember, a man is not merely his mind, just his body, or any other nameable part. When intellectual push comes to shove, civilization commences. At one suspected mystical school, they stated that a real man has but 4 goals in life. The first 3 were to stay alive, and the 4th, to make it mentally worthwhile. Some of its critics claimed that this was far too simplistic. Those who do not understand that all of man's mental activities, including the conveyance of instruction and information, are all forms of entertainment, have no idea what real knowledge would be about. As life was creating the creatures on this planet, it first offered chickens their choice to either be chickens or be eggs. And when man heard this, he wanted in on it. And life let him. Trapped in the city, the left mind dreams, the right one sees visions. To the alert, lean truth surpasses fat opinion. The unfocused mind's most hateful burden is memory. Men speak in neurons, but ultimately do in hormones. And as they departed the garden, the tree of knowledge yelled to them, "Surprise, surprise!" The weak thrive on the past. The idea of being more conscious has not been tried and found to be impossible, but has been found to be extremely difficult, entirely unnecessary, and thus generally disregarded by the majority. Just as no man's credit is as good as his money, so too is no theory, no matter how grand, equal to, no matter how crude, knowledge that gets the job done. It is said that whenever the mighty warrior Cyclops would visit foreign kingdoms, and his host at dining time would offer to sit him directly at the head of the table, an aide would reply, "That is not necessary, for wherever Cyclops sits is the head of the table." And so it is here, now, as regards the ever alert and their intention to be even more so. In a city field stood a tombstone which read, "He is either dead or else working on his master's degree." Many more have seen it than seem to comprehend it. Some television shop talk. Network shows don't actually go off the air. They go into reruns. Yes, all of them. And yes, you are one. All lion thoughts start off as gazelle flesh. A man once heard a proverb that described a happy couple as the husband deaf, the wife blind, and suddenly realized something new about the relationship between man's hormones and his neurons. The speaker asked the crowd, which is worse, a stupid mind or the stupid ideas it espouses? And someone replied, the ideas are worse since they cannot reform. And the speaker doubled over in laughter, saying, don't you wish, sir, don't you wish that's the way it were? And more people present heard what he said than understood what he said. Man's routine state of consciousness amounts to little more than an unintentional running commentary on his routine state of consciousness. Life makes the jungles, man the cities. Seeking wisdom, a boy asked his father, what do you call audacity without talent? And the old man, attempting to impart some, replied, audacity. Damn, thought man's routine mental conditions. He got some nerve talking about me like that. The specious truth of ordinary minds expands as is needed. Bankers like to say that if the profits are great, the risks are greater, which is generally so in all areas save enlightenment. And in what is apparently intended to be a related matter, a man approached a teller's window with a note that said, in life, beware of lawsuits. In hell, beware of lawyers. And several people in line behind him nodded their agreement by what looked to be some sort of reflex action. Since the dawn of man, the majority have been in the majority. If men would conscious more, they'd talk less and think less, and thus be more conscious. The story of a mystical school. There was once a group of people who, when they heard their mystic speak to them, felt mystical, and when they weren't with him, didn't. This was no mystical school. This was a parking lot. Great ideas spring more directly from hormones than do the mundane variety. Just spotted yet another sign on the entry route to the main freeway most citizens take to the heart of the city. This one read, take guff, give guff. Vultures need not sing, nor human scavengers disguise their predilection. It is for superfluous things that ordinary men will most passionately strive, including their brand of knowledge. The father of all proverbs is cynicism, and their mother, the fear that it may be deserved. And now another, how neurons can deceive their own peers, that is, how men fool even them own sweet selves in the only area possible. To suffer, you got to think. To stop, even more. In a certain fashion. The opposite of prevailing opinion and collective wisdom is often the truth. As he looked upon the city and all of its inhabitants, a man thought, 100 years hence, the wealth will be equally distributed. Not only are shrouds without pockets, but also routine mines without safe deposit boxes. When one man who had been struggling with the matter for years heard it said that the main problem with trying to be more conscious is that it's not necessary for an ordinary, normal life, he thought to himself, that's like those ads I see that say, why not learn to make sex better? And I think, hell, if it's any better, I couldn't stand it. Part of what makes great ideas great is that they contain info that is too fast for the ordinary mind to catch. The pious believe that there is nothing worse than an ungrateful man. While, were they more insightful, they'd know it is an unrealized man. Empty stomachs make a lot of noise, and also some other organs in a similar condition. One king had done with it and bestowed an impressive title on every empty suit of armor in the land. Sight problems. If the mystical, that is, the understanding of what life is about, did not seem so obtuse and complex, it would be too plain and simple to be seen at all. Thought one man, of the many things I can do without, old me is definitely one of them. One man declared, no one can be better than their ancestors, to which another responded, except that a real man must. Remember, a little verbal deduction goes a long way. Too far, in fact, for some. So then the guy asked the corpse, is it hard to be cute when you're dying? And the corpse said, you should know. After many years of interest, a father told his son that the secret was to be careful. And the boy asked if he meant morally, and he replied no. And he asked if he meant intellectually, and he replied no. And he asked if he meant socially. And the old man replied no. And the lad realized he had something meaty indeed to chew on. In the beginning, any map a warrior may use is preferable to any already in use. There are two histories of man, and one is not found in books, but in the genes of man. And to read it requires a non-routine mental scanner and condition of consciousness. One man advised his son, never poke at stupidity unless it's already causing you specific problems. And now a full covering of the important matter of a philosophy of life. Any mystic with a philosophy of life ain't no real mystic. And our man from last time who watches the news offers these additional views thereabout. What's the big deal? Dumb people do dumb things. What's the deal? Just as a clever mouse has more than one hole, so too a wise man more than one idea. A man with more promise can bleed through excessive comment. A warrior who faces his own proper foe thinks, we triumph in vain when we conquer the weak. Just as a man can continue to run even when tired, so too can he think. Under gravity, a mirror shows everyone their best friend. But when freed, Mercury runs for cover. There is something that the wise don't tell and the foolish don't ask about. It's been claimed that 'tis a wise traveler who knows when to return, but a mystic can go one better than that. One side of a guy's brain said, the truth is always the best argument. Not so, replied the other. Silence. One day a man said to his consciousness, I think about you a lot. And it replied, do you? Yes, and your possibilities fascinate me. And consciousness replied, really? Yes, and as you may have noticed, I have at times undertaken specific efforts to try and make the best use of this potential. And consciousness replied, And the man finally said, you don't talk much, do you? And it replied, no, but I don't listen much either. A reporter of some renown called a reputed mystic who never gave interviews to try and gain one, and immediately after stating his desire, repeated his own name several times, asking the mystic, do you know who I am? And the mystic replied, I know who everyone is. As they danced, he whispered, good news doesn't have to be sold or promoted. To which she replied, then why are there not mystical outlets on every corner? The more conscious are never alone. Well, I was going to tear into so-called mysticism again for you. Maybe that's what some people at cheap service stations approach me and say that they find the show fascinating. Could be worse. It must be the fumes, because I've even had people say they find me fascinating. But think about the real fascination. If they understood that here it is, we could have called the show, amongst other things, instead of just new intelligence, we could have called it modern mysticism. And then people that might be interested in such affairs could tune it in, and it sounded to be nothing but, at least an indirect form of criticism of things mystical. Sight problems, vision difficulties. If the mystical, that is, the understanding of what life is about, that's actually far enough, did not seem so obtuse and complex, it would be too plain and simple to be seen at all. That, let me reread another one. I assume it made enough sense. There was a man who for many years had been interested in certain matters. The matter is obviously, once you hear it, being matters mystical. Traveled far away to consult with someone who was reported to be an expert in these matters. And after he got there, he says, as regards the traditional descriptions, the reason I'm rereading it, I know I added 8 or 10 of the better known. But you understand, he's simply repeating to this apparent or this reputed mystical expert. He says, and he's just repeating the ones that are traditionally known. As regards this the traditional description of the experience and state, we're assuming that he thinks, by using the terms that he's about to and by describing it as the traditional descriptions of this experience and state, that he and the reputed expert are on the same wavelength. They know what they're talking about. The experience and state of. And he just mentions 8 or 10 that I picked out, sometimes shifted around a little, but it covers about the full gamut and menu that men have verbally used to try and describe what they imagine this to be, or those who have had it once, or at least so weak, in such a weak fashion that they attempt to then verbally describe it in some stable manner. But he says, as regards the traditional descriptions of this, and then he names them. Some of the ones I wanted you to consider, because I purposefully, a few of them I just repeated and some I put together in a different fashion to cover it. He says, regarding the traditional descriptions of the experience and states of enlightenment, the awakening, the perfection of understanding, the unity with the divine, God, the revelation of the secret, the immersion in eternity, the unveiling of the mystery, the integration with the infinite, the oneness, the illumination, the true knowledge of things. What he's saying is, beyond all of those, he said, I have heard it recently described, the whole experience and condition, as simply being more conscious. Is this conceivably correct? And then the sight problems. If the mystical, that is, the understanding of what life is about, which would be the understanding of someone who had adequately, properly, someone who actually had the experience that the man had been naming, that the mystical, the understanding of what life is about. If it did not appear so obtuse and complex, which everyone agrees to that, even critics, even disbelievers in the mystical, would say, well, even if it did exist, even if there was a modicum of reality behind the idea of the mystical, my God, they have made it so hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo-ish, and you can't make head and a tail of it, which is one way to be able to dismiss it. But besides those who would reject the whole idea out of hand, how about all of those from the world of academia, from that level, from that end of a spectrum, to those who actually believe that they're involved with the attempt? All of them would find some agreement, as long as I didn't make it sound as though it were an attack, to describe the mystical as being obtuse and complex. Well, what else can you call it? It's not an attack. It just seems to be, that's an understatement to say that it's somewhat obscure when you hear it described, when you try to think about it, and complex. It just seems that if you start looking around or trying to consult with others or consult with books about the matter, you find everything ranging from Christian mysticism to what appears to be a secular form of Buddhism. You find something for everyone. You find that stories of a Jesus, which is now interpreted as being a kind of passive reaction to life. You find all the way from that, you can dip right in, join right in, all the way into like a Buddha would be sort of in the middle. It apparently sort of went, well, hey, things are as they are. Then move on to other side of that particular spectrum and find the Muhammad out saying, here's the secret of life. You got 5 seconds, either nod that you agree with this or die. That he conquered by the sword. And I'm just saying that the common perception of religion, which ordinary people consider to be the cloak in some way of the mystical, if it exists. But you've got all the way from what appears to be a passive Jesus a Christianity, a religion of turning the other cheek, all the way to that which seems to be sort of a sense of fatalism in the middle, then on to what appears to be a more aggressive form of don't take no shit off anybody, is the mystical way. So, but within all of that, no matter which one a person attempted to pursue, they could find no fault with describing the mystical, the whole idea, not just from other people's writings, which is where you normally get it, you think, that it all sounds obtuse and complex. If it did not sound that way, if that was not a fair description, then you would buy a book that says how to be enlightened, or how to be more conscious, how to be awakened. And I was going to say they'd put it in a page, if not a sentence, but at least in one book. There wouldn't be all these other books. Somebody that knew it, somebody had been through it sometime, would simply write it down and say, all right, here's what it is, here's how to do it. And if you're interested, you'd read it and go, okay, I got that, and you'd do it. It appears to be extremely cloudy, vague, and complex. Extremely complex. But what if my description, and this one is, even more revealing than you first thought, or the first two times I read it? Here it goes a third time. It's the mystical, that is, the understanding of what life's about. And people can call it anything they want to. But as far as what it produces, it does not produce the ability to fly through the air. It does not produce the ability to rise from the dead back at this level. It does not include the ability to read minds, because I can teach you to do that. Anybody. It does not include anything other than the understanding of what life's about. Everything else is advertising. Everything else is, and I don't mean that someone's conspiratorially behind it, it is fluff. It is superfluous edges that people imagine. And almost everyone, probably everyone who ever starts pursuing that kind of path in the beginning does think, because it is normal. That's where you're operating from, is closer to the physical level. When you start with, you think, God, it'd be great to be as conscious or as enlightened as Buddha. And let's say that struck you at some early age, 17, 18, you first read it. I can remember for you, since you can't, what you really thought about being Buddha. It wasn't just the understanding and enlightenment. As soon as you heard it, if you were wired up genetically to potentially be a mystic, then it's certain when you first started hearing about such as this, it just made you tingle and you thought, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then I'll go back and remember for you, what you really imagined was the kind of enlightenment, the wisdom of a Buddha. Ah, God. What would it bring? I'd probably be able to get in every girl's pants I wanted. I bet you people like that, I bet he could go out in the woods and just touch leaves and they'd turn into gold. It was all magic. And by magic I do intend a certain negative connotation. It's imagination. The laws of physics. The formula I told you of the 2 and 3 that runs the man's mind, man's mental perception of this reality. There is no such thing as magic. Science is right in one thing, that there are no exemptions to the laws of science. Of course, then they themselves keep having problems with that. But I'm just pointing out that every now and then men inadvertently, their lips and tongues actually say something that's damn near irrefutable, except, as I point out, they come back right along and refute it. And have to say, well, wait a minute, the laws that we saw it last year, or last century, the laws in this particular area that were not completely refined. There is no such thing as magic. And if there was, it'd be a waste of time. If there was, I'm not going to go into this. I didn't even mean to bring it up necessarily. If there was actually such a thing as magic, and someone who was attempting to be a mystic knew it and tried it, he'd lose money.
Oh.
The outcome, the payoff of the enlightenment, the payoff if you could actually be Christ-like, Buddha-like, if you had Buddha mind, if you were any of the description, but if you were enlightened, the experience produces one thing. My description is as concise, as valid, safe as you could ask for. It is the understanding of what life's about. What else would you expect it to be? Now, I know the 17-year-olds, even if you're in a 60-year-old body, 17-year-old minds still think, yeah, I bet you can read minds that you'll be able to pick the lottery tomorrow, the right number. It's the understanding of what life is about. So I'm going to repeat the whole thing now for the third time. If the mystical, that is, the understanding of what life is about, did not seem so obtuse and complex, it would be too plain and simple to be seen at all. Do you understand? It is easy enough, for instance, to attack religion from all sorts of views, especially if you moved up a little further from just a street level criticism of religion, just a smart ass picking on religion. If you moved up a bit further, relatively speaking, at city level, that is, you pursued religion in the sense of having a mystical hunger, and you found that they were not serving such fare. Then you could criticize religion, you might say, on a higher level. You could say, well, I had some faith in religion. It's very common for would-be mystics to change religions right off the bat at an early age, which is understandable. There's nothing fishy about it. It's understandable once you see it. It's a waste of time, sort of. But in the sense that they pursue, if there is, for the people out in TV land, they can worry about what an oxymoron is or is not. A sane would-be mystic, the first place at some early age that you turn to is reflected in all the stories from Buddha to Jesus to Abraham, is you turn to your father's religion, whatever religion you were born in. That's where you turn, because as soon as you start getting the urge, as soon as you had some idea of the mystical, that you heard about it, some traveler came through a little town, or you read it in a book, and you just a little bit, you went, that's it. That is what's been bothering me all these years. I now know what it is I want. And there is no question, where's the first place you look? You might ask your father or something, and he may go, well, and as soon as he hesitates, you would know what he's going to say. He's going to go say, go see the priest. Go the shaman of our village. And if he didn't, if you didn't have a father, if you did it on your own, it is natural. That is the first place. I mean, who else are you going to think about? So a person goes and you find out that your local religion does not deal in what you're asking. It is very common after that, you don't know what to do. You don't know necessarily where to go after that. And so it's very common to assume that your particular religion is in some way lacking this one element. And so you go pick up a book and you read about some other religion. And you can find, especially if you've already temporarily become soured on yours, disappointed that yours did not deal in the mystical information, that they want to put you off, that they want to say, well, man can't understand that, or you're asking the impossible, whatever it is. And again, assuming that you keep some stable sanity about your hunger and quest, then you realize, well, this cannot be true. How could I feel this? How could I read descriptions that just are right on the money from whether it was 10 years ago or 5,000 years ago? And how is it that I feel that that's it, and I'm staying here, I am not experiencing a mini stroke, I am conscious, I am sane, nobody has to tell me, you don't have to ask, but you realize they're now telling me that what I want, that I have a hunger that can't be fed, and you just know that can't be true. So let us say that the person goes back to the library, goes to a library, and they read about another religion across the mountains on the other side of the world. And is almost as though afresh, or with fresh eyes, they can read in this other person's foreign religion what appears to be additional or more precise detailings, mentions of the mystical experience. And so it's very common then for the person to think, well, that's it. And without necessarily getting mad at your father's religion, you think, well, no, that's what I got to do. I've got to go over there. It has to do with Mary and the Lamb and the goof field. It has to do with the electrochemistry of the body, and it has to do with the 2 and 3 formula. It has to do with being able to cut yourself off mentally, because The quick version I gave you tonight was when intellectual push comes to shove, civilization begins. I could have made a version before that and just say when hormones and neurons, with them, when push comes to shove, the intellect begins, thinking begins. And then it should have been a different stage, maybe skip down the page and then put in the second one. And then when intellectual, did you follow? I could have said between neurons and hormones, when push comes to shove, intellectualization begins. Pause. When intellectual push comes to shove, civilization begins. That was all thrown in somewhat parenthetically to hint you again why it is that it seems proper and it's very predictable for people to want to change religions. Oftentimes that will cure them in the sense of almost being worn down. That you go to all the trouble to leave your forefathers' religion, perhaps sustain some of their displeasure, have to move to another part of the world, or at least have to move internally. You have to give up some of your friends and family, and you have to take up another religion. There is an expense involved. There is a cost involved to convert to another religion, especially with one who is doing it for apparent would-be mystical reasons. It's not near as costly, if at all, to simply convert, by the way, to please your marriage partner, just to do it for no particular reason. But when you think that there is actual value, personal value of a near sacred kind potentially involved, then there is a cost for a man to say, all right, I will no longer be Jewish, I will become a Muslim, or I will no longer be a Hindu, I will become a Christian. There is a cost involved. And so the fairly predictable procedure of many would-be mystics changing religions, what I mean by worn down, I know that was a colloquial phrase, it's as though you have invested enough and you move over to this other area, at least externally, internally, if not externally, and you convert to another religion in the hopes, in the belief that they are going to be dealing more specifically in potentially mystical nourishment, and they do not. With most people, it's, I can't pay it again. I just can't go any further, and they either drift out of that religion, it just becomes mechanical, or they may drift back at the age of 45 or 50 when they start developing heart murmurs and shortness of breath. They may drift back to their father's religion just in case. But all in all, every idea of the mystical, and we could shave it down for ordinary people, even to the truly religious, if you wanted to see, at least anybody thought that the idea, I know you people might not necessarily, but if someone was hearing this that had not been exposed to my use of the terminologies, they might think, well, the mystical is a little too spooky for me. You could say the truly religious, since all religions will say, the classic being that Christians will say, that no one is Christ-like but Christ. Or everyone will say, no, I am not a Christian, no one is a Christian. That is, no one can be perfected. There's no such thing. Only our founder, only God is perfect. And so they're saying it cannot be done. With a strong suspicion that it can be done, if you look just at religion, it also appears to be too obtuse and too complex. That's why I was trying to get you to see. I'm back to what I'm describing the mystical in a second, but I want you to see even ordinary people, they do not normally use such terms, but I want you to see that this is not a discrete, this is not a quantum break in the area of mysticism from ordinary thought. It's just an extenuation to the point that people do not take it into consideration. It moves, if I may quote myself from tonight again, it moves too fast for the ordinary mind to catch it. You can hear the words, it can make sense rhetorically, and either you have to dismiss it if you're an ordinary person, fairly ordinary, or you listen and you think, well, I heard the words, but I'm missing something, which then it's only one step to coming up with such ideas as mystical, transcendental, that the information, I don't mean just that I said it, but you think, well, the books I'm reading that says, here's how to be a perfect human. And let us say that you picked out the 10 Commandments if you were Jewish, or you just picked out the Golden Rule if you were Christian. And it says that this is the way to perfection. And you read it and you think, well, I understand that. It's not gibberish. It makes perfect sense. Rhetorically, you understand, you think exactly what it means. You could check with somebody, a priest, a rabbi, just turn to your wife or your sister and say, does that make sense to you? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And they go, well, yeah. Does the Ten Commandments, would you read each and every one? Yeah. Does it matter? Yeah. There's no question. It's not ambiguous. It doesn't offer conditions. It just states outright, thou shalt not, and thou shalt. And so you could say, well, it is certainly not confusing. It is certainly not obtuse. It is right out in the open. And yet it's not, because they will turn right around. The leading exponents are just the faithful followers of the religion. You say, all right, are you a Jew? And the person says, well, certainly I'm Jewish. And you go, no. Can you live by the Ten Commandments? And they go, well, I try. No. Can you live by them? Do you live by them? Or ask a Christian. Do you love your fellow man as yourself? Well, sometimes. No. Do you? It doesn't say sometimes, does it? And they go, well, no. Well, it says, and so it says, can you do it? Do you understand the sense as well as I do? And they go, yeah, I've been working on it. My religion is extremely important to me. And so you understand that at first it is very plain. What could be plainer than love thy neighbor, love thy fellow man as thyself? There's no way out of that. There are no asterisks on it, as far as I know, no conditions. It's stated right outright, just those few words. And so it would seem to be anything but obtuse and complex. And yet what is it? Hoping you didn't lose your place, I know. What I'm trying to point out, just that religion, and you don't have to get into the mystical, is they do not understand that there is a level of complexity. There is a level of understanding a man can have that goes beyond the complex. Now, I'll get to that in a minute. Don't lose your place for the second time in one long sentence. It is simply, before we even get to the mystical, it is simply that ordinary people, your mothers, fathers, husbands, sisters, ordinary, sane people on this planet, would say that religion, their religion, is plain and simple and to the point. And yet you say, well, can you do it? Can you be a Christian? Are you truly a Muslim? That is, are you completely submissive to God? Are you a slave of God? Is your real name Abdullah Muslim? Are you totally submissive to God? And they go, no. Well, is there something in the opening of the Quran that you cannot live by? I mean, is there something you don't understand, I should say? And they go, well, no, it's plain enough. Plain enough. But then when you ask, are you a Buddhist? Do you have Buddha mind? Are you a Christian? Are you a Jew? And the people say no. That does not constitute some obtuseness and complexity. That is, in the sense before, if you said, do you understand, would you say the main tenet, or the one idea of Christianity by which a man could fashion his life is love thy neighbor as thyself? And the Christian says yes. And you say you don't have any doubt about that. I mean, there's nothing unclear in the sentence. No. And then you say, well, can you do it? And they go, well, no. You don't find that to be extremely obtuse and complex, that they describe it. And you say, and it doesn't say, to be a Christian, you must be able to learn to fly by flapping your arms. Now, you understand that sentence, but that's ridiculous. But you say, you ask a person, well, is it a safe statement to say that the purpose of religion, or your religion, is to love your fellow man as yourself? And they go, yes. And you say, and it's possible. I mean, it's not like saying, you got to learn to fly. And they go, oh, no. So it is possible. And if they don't watch it, they go, well yeah. Unless they began to chemically suspect that you're on a seesaw or about to dance with them, which was not the purpose. But all it will take is for you to ask one or two more questions like, well, I'm delighted to meet you because I've always been interested. How do you do it? And then they go, well, wait a minute, I didn't say I could do it. And you can say, well, do you know someone who can? And they go, well, no. And that's when they have to go back to, well, no one is perfect. You do not find that there is a whole normally unrecognized level of obtuseness in the fact that there's a simple idea, love thy fellow man as thyself. And everybody goes, got it. And you say, and it's possible, got it. And the sentence is not unclear, it's not cloudy in some area. How many words is it? Love thy neighbor love thy neighbor as thyself. In those 6 words, I mean, there's not something hidden in there, some time bomb, there's not a trick in there. Oh no. And you don't see, you can't think of any human reason, any physiological, biological, psychological reason that a person could not do that. Well, no. And you say, well, would you teach me? Oh, well, I can't do it. Well, would you direct me to somebody who can? Oh, well, nobody can. You don't find that to be an unrecognized, unsuspected level of obtuseness, complexity. It makes the words obtuse and complex, as far as I'm concerned, look far too simple. That's what I want you to understand, the knowledge of this kind of pseudo. I see there are 2 levels, or 2 forks of this. It's a kind of pseudo simplicity, but it's also a kind of faux complexity. Is that that people say, well, yes, the purpose of life is to love thy fellow man as thyself. But no, I can't do it. And if you tried to point out to them, well, this takes what apparently, by your own admission, was originally a simple, direct idea that is humanly possible, yes, and you say no one can do it. And yet millions, billions of people are trying to, yes, paying lip service, yes. You don't find that to be, I mean, aren't you surprised now that you've said this, just between you and I talking, doesn't it strike you that, wow, you don't have to say more than that, but doesn't it make you go, wow? And they go, well, no. No. And they're not sure what you mean, like, well, because what's taking place is I'm giving you a fork. I'm not going back and verbally wrestle with this because it'll just could turn souffles into mashed potatoes. I know some of you have your own neural problems as it is. Is it has made the complex simplistic in a faux manner, and it has made the simplistic more complex in a pseudo manner simultaneously, which is why men have 2 eyes, in case you never thought about what binocular vision is. Well, that, and you have to be sort of dazed enough not to realize that you're cross-eyed. But that's an additional vision problem that we do not have time to go into tonight. Plus, I'm not licensed in the state here of Vermont to discuss matters of optometry. Religion itself, which is taken to be by the most by the most traditional, sane, civilized, middle-class people on this planet, religion is not taken to be mystical when you get down to the most conservative level. But what I want you to see is, even at that most conservative level, those who would denounce the whole idea of mysticism, which you do know that people do not necessarily individually engage in such railings, and it does not necessarily move an individual to some overt behavior, but it is a fairly common institutional denunciation coming from religion of mysticism. Because even if you tell someone, such as a Christian, wait a minute, there are people that even called. I have something here published by the Catholic Church, if you're talking about a Catholic, and it says right here, it's one of your leading theologians refers to Augustine as a mystic, or refers to Aquinas as a mystic. And then we go, well, yeah. But if you push it much further, with them, with Jews, with Muslims, with anybody on this planet, a middle-class, ordinary person may have some favor with their religion. If you said, well, there have been people in your religion who were mystics, they were even called that at the time. And they go, yeah, but it does not collectively sit well. Life does not want it in an institutional form to be accepted that mysticism is an acceptable part of religion, much less admirable or desirable, because it is taken as being religion gone too far. It is taken that you're trying to be religious perhaps, and perhaps you meant well, but you've gone too far. And what do they mean by too far? They mean, well, wait a minute, you're actually trying to do it. That is not how they would put it. And I do not have to put words in their mouths, because history books are full of it. Religious books, if you don't know, it is very common for them to denounce, and at times in the past they would even condemn physically, to torture to death, somebody who stands up and says, Muslim, Jew, Christian, that will say things to the fact that, wait a minute, I now understand what it is to be a Christian. And somebody says, or a Jew, and somebody says, well, good. And they go, no. Maybe I didn't, it's not that I understand. I understand what all this is about. And they go, okay, great. You're with us. And go, no. And they say, well, come on to the meetings, sit up front. No, I don't have to sit up front. I don't even have to come here anymore. And they go, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? You've got to come here and worship God or Jehovah or Allah. And then, according to history, I'll take the description because I understand it. It's very common that so-called mystics have then go, well, I don't have to come and study about God. I am God. And this was long before New Age kind of allegory and kind of a new level of anthropomorphism and naturalism. It was that a guy stood up that had been a recognized stable member of that religion, perhaps a revered. And one day he goes, no, I don't have to come back here anymore. I don't have to talk about it. I am Allah. I understand everything God understands. Now you comprehend at that level, collectively, institutionally, the same people at that time and place. They all have to, is their conclusion. Life makes everyone go, that you have gone too far. And it's quite easily understandable why life would do that, or if you can't see that yet, why ordinary people would do that. You cannot stand up. You could take it not just an ordinary person. If suddenly a pope, to use that, he's the easiest example, he's the head of a church. If you consider that he is the best example of a Christian on this planet. If one day he showed up and he started to give out a little sermon or something, and finally he went, nah, he said, I got to stop all this. He said, I'm not going to talk anymore. I mean, I'm show up. I want you to understand, it's not me giving sermons, or I don't have to talk anymore for years. I've devoted my whole life to this, as you people know. I want you to know, backstage, I've been working on other things, and I finally understand what life is and what God is, and I know as much as God knows. I got nothing else to say to you. I'm not going to condemn you. No more sermons. No. I am God. I understand what life and God's about as well as anybody, as well as God does. Now, I'm using him for the example to take it out of the ordinary of just somebody stumbling off the street or a regular member of the congregation. They would be fast enough ready and properly ready to condemn him as, have lost your mind. They would do the same thing to the Pope. That's what I want you to see. The thing is, within the context of what it is purporting to be, you cannot understand what it is. I don't mean that you can't. The people involved can't. If the Pope went, well, wait a minute, I know there's been people in the past here in our congregation that say that they talk to Jesus or Mary or something. I know sometimes we pat them on the head and give them a cold compress and ask them to see a psychiatrist. But I'm going to have to tell you people the truth. I hadn't been up here wearing these clothes and trying to run this office for the fun of it. I wanted to understand what God was. I wanted to actually do all the mystical things that we used to read about. And I want you to know, I have achieved it. It's not just yesterday, and I can't put up with this anymore. I'm not going to show up here and keep this up. I know the secret of life. I know what life is about. In other words, I know what God knows. So I got nothing else to say, and I'm tired of doing this. I wish everybody well. He'd be lucky to get out of there before they, for his own good. The people around him go, quick, call the wagon, because they would think he had lost his mind. It has to appear that way. I know I spent more time on that than I threatened on the religious side, but I want you to understand it is not just in the areas that appear to be occult, weird, and strange. That's something you don't find religion weird, strange, and occult now, but ordinary people do not. It all must appear to be. It all must seem to be. Well, let me go back and finally finish the quoting of myself. The mystical. And I explained it quite simply. The mystical, comma, parentheses, that is, colon, or dash. All right, enough of that. The mystical. The mystical, that is, and I'm giving you the definition. Definitions do not come much shorter and pithy than this. The mystical, that is, the understanding of what life is about. That's it. The mystical, the understanding of what life is about, must appear obtuse and complex. Must. Or else it would seem far too simple and plain to be seen at all. You got to understand the at all. Because as it is, the religious people, ordinary people, they don't have to be religious, but I keep using them as, even at city level, sort of a cut above just an ordinary walking stomach and sex organ kind of guy. Just somebody that's a little more civilized, and they look upon it all as being complex and obtuse. So that's the part they see. That's why I want you to understand the emphasis I'm placing, that if it did not appear so complex and obtuse, and if I need be now, I didn't waste the modifier, I didn't want to distract you when I originally wrote it, I could say if it did not appear, did not seem overly. Of course, then you've got to have some understanding yourself to even know why I threw that in, because if I was an ordinary person saying that, you'd take it as being an attack on religion or the mystical. To say, well, it's your opinion, it's overly. That's like saying, well, we're overly taxed. And you could say, well, you're just anti-government. Okay. Things, once you see what it is, then right quick, with one eye, if you got a glimpse of what life is about, if you just got a little glimpse, then you could, to yourself, say, well, everything I've ever thought, everything that was ever written, everything I ever read, they made it sound more complex than it is, now that I can just get a glimpse, right. But here's the thing. If it did not appear so, which I'm now telling you is overly, unwarranted, not then, but later, subsequently. If it did not appear so obtuse and complex, then people couldn't even see what little they do see. Now you can, if you getting this wide in your vision, even skip mystical and religious and say life, reality, consciousness. If the whole affair of being alive did not appear to be such a complex, obtuse thing, you don't have to be religious, you could be an atheist, which produces its own form of complexity and obtuseness. If life itself did not appear to be just life, you don't have to have a major complaint, just at any given time. All you got to do is be conscious. And people say, well, is life complex or what? It's complex to thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, cavemen. Think how complex they'll get up every day. And you don't know whether you're going to be alive. You don't know whether you're going to get eaten. You don't know whether, if you're not eating, whether you'll find enough food. Talk about complex. I mean, you didn't have 1 minute time out. You had to wake up and hit the ground running. Or you can look at it now that you don't even have to work. That you're living in the lap of luxury, in the lap of some city environment. But the complexity of how many forms you have to fill out to get on unemployment or to get food stamps. The point, it is always complex. When you look out there with the ordinary mind, it is always, not just from a religious perspective, and obviously not from, or I'm trying to see, not just a mystical. An ordinary man's view of life is, if anything, is complex. No matter where you live, if you live in the jungle or if you live in Manhattan, it is complex. But now, this still applies to my final line. But if it did not appear, and now the insinuation still being that it's not all that complex. But if it did not appear, then the ordinary mind wouldn't even see what little it does see. Which, if you can now take it to the life itself, it's like, the point is you wouldn't see anything. If you saw life simple, you would be back to the moment of creation on the assembly line, that you and life. There it was, and life looked you dead in the eye, and you had a second, and everyone blinks and looks away, or you're supposed to. That's when things become complex. But if they didn't, the whole idea that, boy, if I'd known what I know now, the moment I got recreated, or when I was created, or if I come back in another life, if all that's true, then next time I'll keep staring at life. No, you won't.
Yeah.
You can't. Well, if you do, you'll come out brain damaged. So it has to be complex. Apparently. Or you wouldn't even see what you see now. But behind it is something else.